number 6, purchase of advanced placement AP exams. Dr. Hall.
Yes, thank you. The state of Georgia will pay for one exam for all DeKalb students that are free and reduced lunch status. And this item requests that the Board of Education pay for one advanced placement exam for all DeKalb students regardless of their free reduced lunch status. So potentially we could have a free reduced lunch student who is enrolled in more than one advanced placement course, and they would then receive 2 free exams, but all students, regardless of their status, would receive one paid for exam. So the requested action, it's requested that the Board of Education approve the purchase of advanced placement exams from College Board for the May 2014 administration in the amount not to exceed $230,000. This is a testing expenditure that does not require bid per the district's purchasing policy, DJE.
Mr. Orson.
Dr. Howland, I know we talked a little bit about this last week. I mean, I'm very supportive of AP, and I think, rigor is a critical element of increasing our results across the school system. But I'm concerned, when I look at our passing rate compared to the state of Georgia's for a 3 or higher on these exams, that, that's to take nothing away from perhaps the rigor of the coursework, but I am concerned that they're not getting the results that they might expect in terms of college credit at the end of this, and therefore that we are falling short. And this is not meant to dissuade us from doing something for this year because we're well into the year, but I think it's important we begin to have a long-term view about how do we deliver the best results for increasing rigor and hopefully getting kids the college credits, which may look at alternatives like increased dual enrollment, but also to figure out why we are so substantially below the state in results. I mean, there's just no way to look at this and pat ourselves on the back and say we're doing a good job, because we're not. And, it means that we need to fix something. And I'd love to hear a little bit now and then maybe longer term about what our plans are for fixing it.
Great question. Per the district's strategic plan, goal area 1, we'll be looking at 3 broad areas to ensure equity and access to increase student achievement as it pertains to AP courses as well as other advanced academic courses such as IB, dual enrollment, Move On When Ready, or High Achievers courses. The 3 areas that we will explore that are being written into the strategic plan and our division plan and for region plans to consider fall into achievement, teacher quality, and access. The achievement will look not only at the AP exam scores but also at course grades. The teacher quality will continue through training efforts through Title II teacher quality, as well as the DOE has an advanced placement grant that we participate in. We support through our curriculum and instruction general fund dollars, sending AP teachers to College Board AP conferences. So we'll continue to enhance that teacher quality through supporting professional learning relative to instructing advanced placement courses, as well as the other advanced courses, as well as access. This agenda item is an example of where we focus on access. So if cost of an exam is something that would be a barrier to get in the way of any student being able to take the test, this is one way we'll address access, as well as collaboratively working with school leadership and operation to focus on scheduling, better scheduling, making sure that advanced courses, not only AP, but a variety of advanced coursework is available across all regions and the different schools. So just to reiterate, this is being specifically targeted in the strategic plan so that we can have specific initiatives and have milestones with metrics assigned to it. And in fact, there's some audits that are taking place, and you'll hear more this evening about the gifted program audit, but the career pathways audit that you all approved is going to give us some specific recommendations that we can act upon for advanced coursework like dual enrollment, move on when ready. So there are some things in motion, and there are some additional things that will come out of the strategic plan.
Mr. Coleman.
So I just have a suggestion as we're looking through that. I would love for us to talk, when I look at the sheet, what jumps out to me is, while the system is, as Mr. Orson stated, is significantly below Georgia, there are a few schools that are doing remarkably well in this area. I mean, Chamblee is at 74%. I mean, they're, nearly, more than 20 points higher than Georgia, and they've had increases. Lakeside is the same. Southwest DeKalb has seen remarkable increases over the last couple of years. I would love to have some of the folks who are leading those programs come and talk to us about, because the gap between some of these schools is just enormous, and that's a pretty diverse array of schools that have seen real improvements over the last few years. I'd love to see us consult the folks who are leading those efforts in those schools.
Dr. Marley.
When I was reading this and going in preparation for the board meeting today, I was just quite pleased. I headed up the AP program in the school system in Rochester, and I've always been for that. But I think most certainly that accessibility is very important. And because a child doesn't get free or reduced lunch, doesn't mean that they can actually afford to be able to have the exam. So I like to see this across the board. I also like the fact of what we're building into the strategic plan, but I think another part of that, which is a part of the superintendent's initiative, is parent involvement, parent engagement. And we have to also be realistic when we look at, as Mr. Coleman was pointing out, the disparity in some of the schools. There still is an economic basis that's going on here, which is a part of the superintendent's plan also. So I think we have to begin to look at economically what's going on. Also, the knowledge base of, do parents know that this is available? I remember when my daughters came from New York and came here, I had to fight tooth and nail in order to be able to find the school that had the AP classes. So are we doing justice by offering those classes to students where we could possibly have more students who are attaining more than a 3 or above on the exam? So I'm glad to hear that we're actually offering this where there's affordability for all students, but at the same time looking at there are many variables, and I think that's what we have to continue to look at. There are many variables when you're talking about student achievement, student academic achievement, and what actually drive those scores. What is it with those students? Interviewing the students, interviewing the parents, understanding from the teacher's perspective. And I think we have to recognize it's not just the teachers. And I think if we go back to the AP, Atlanta Public Schools, that's where it was left off. And when I taught at the college level, we still keep believing that the teacher is always a problem. There are more other things that are going on. We need to be able to look at that when we look at that assessment. What's happening with that child? Are they studying? Are we providing opportunities for them to study it the way that they need to? What about parents? Can parents help them? Do they need extra help? Because we're talking about a rigorous approach to academics. We want them to excel at this level, but are we providing what they need in order for them, and not just a course? Even though they're capable, we might not be providing all the resources. I just want to thank you, Dr. Howell, for this initiative, and I think it's important that we do have all students eligible to be able to have access. That's when we call quality and equality, when everybody's accessible to that access.
Mr. Mayfield.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Howe, and I appreciate the answers that you provided me. I guess this is maybe somewhat repetitive to you, but I did have a couple of questions that sort of come out of a result of the answers that you provided. As you approach the strategic planning processes, maybe this is more of a request than it is a question. Or a set of questions, is that we sort of really think about those in those 3 areas that I referenced in my questions. One being being able to have tools or processes that will give some predictive value to what's happening with students prior to taking the test, so that we can find ways to channel, for lack of a better term, the more prepared students into the process to improve those rates, as well as being able to sort of ascertain what the sustainability, or how long do these students who do pass the test, do they stay with the curriculum? Because the dropout rate of those programs would be important to me to understand as well. And then finally, what are some of the data points that we get out of both the intervention process, the testing process, as well as the sustaining the curriculum process, those three sets of data, to sort of help us in other areas of maybe students who may not even be in AP, but to be able to sort of systematically approach the gathering and the massaging or the analysis of that data to try to get as much bang for the buck, I guess, as we can.
Thank you. Dr. Howe, do we keep up with the mobility rate in the school system anymore? And that is, how many of these students do we actually educate? Did they come from another school system? Is this a component part of the graduation component? You don't have to respond to that. I just wanted to address that.
Mr. Chair, I think Dr. Thompson can speak to that because Ms. Brixton is leading an effort for us to do a better job in tracking just that point, and I'll let Dr. Thompson speak to that.
And Dr. Johnson, we have not, Ms. Brixton is working on the mobility portion of this. She has worked with IT, Melanie McClinton, and they're coming up with a proposal that she's going to be presenting to the superintendent, who probably will be presenting it to the board soon. So we have discussed that, and we are working up a plan with that, a proposal.
Thank you. My guess is that it would be high, as it normally is, in selected areas.
Dr. Johnson.
Dr. Morley, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I want to say here again, when we look at it from a broader perspective, we have to begin to look at school counselors. You know, their level of knowing who could actually, we'll be talking about predictability as Mr. Mayfield was saying, and I would hate to get in total predictability, because what about Johnny, who was told that he would never amount to anything, or Mary, who was told that she would never be successful, she needs to go on and she becomes a governor, or she becomes superintendent of schools or anything like that. So I think, not saying that that's what happened, you know. So, right. So I would hate to really get into that, and as a former educator, knowing that happens a lot of times, children are predicted to fail. They're predicted that they're not going anywhere. But most certainly, I think that we overlook a very precious group of people, and those are school counselors, and helping them to be a part of that process of looking at and actually mapping and charting what's going with the student, and being able to say to Johnny or to Mary, you know what, I think there's a challenge, because sometimes we can use AP classes and we're looking at money again and numbers, but the average child needs to be challenged, and we will get the biggest bang for our bucks when we begin to challenge and pull that internal effort out of that particular child. But I would like to see more done with our school counselors and helping them to be a part of that predictability, and working with them to see who actually should possibly be an AP, or the potentiality of them being an AP, but also following them along and tracking them as they're going through the coursework. What are their needs? And in order to do that, again, it comes back to more money. You know, seeing that school counselors are very relevant, because usually when we reduce a budget, the school counselors are one of the first people that's cut. And so we've got to begin to look at, from an emotional standpoint, you know, if a student is stressed out, if a student just really feels that this is too tough for them and they drop out, why are they dropping out? That school counselor is very relevant to understanding that. And I think that as we begin to put more money into seeing that they're very important, that they can do what they're trained to do and not just be paper pushers. And so I would like to see school counselors be a real part of that process.
Last question, Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to second Mr. Coleman's suggestion about communicating with our AP teachers, our highly successful teachers, and not to put a number, but know the individual, as Dr. Morley has said. I want to know the kid at Chamblee who's taken 9 AP tests, right? I mean, I want to know that kid. And speaking about how stressed out that child may be. So in addition to knowing the teachers, let's get to know some of our high achieving students also, and see what kind of, and for other students maybe to emulate, you know? So anyway, that's my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Is there any opposition to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, this item will be placed on the consent agenda.